أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. How are you sure that you're reciting Surah Fatiha correctly? Think about it. In the Fard prayers alone, you recite Surah Fatiha 17 times a day. In fact, if you add up all the different prayers, the Fard, the Sunnah, Nafil, Tarawih, Ramadan, night prayers, etc., Surah Fatiha is potentially recited 12,000 times a year. Did you hear me? 12,000 times. And if you're not reciting it correctly, that's mistakes you're making 12,000 times a year. So I highly recommend that you watch this video to the end, and I promise you, you will learn the correct way to recite Surah Fatiha, and then you really will be able to get 10 out of 10 each and every time you recite, or at the very least you'll get an idea of where you might be going wrong. I'm super excited to share this video with you. If you are too, give this video a like, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified every time I post a new video, and let's get on with it. You're watching Gates of Jannah. So let's get into this. So here we have one page of the Quran, the first page. This is Surah Fatiha. This is the opening chapter of the Quran, and it means the opening. So we have here 7 ayahs, and you will notice here ayah number 1 is the Bismillah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the Hafs Quran, which is the Quran that we use, Surah Fatiha is part of the 7 ayahs included in Surah Fatiha. It's not at the start and then Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen is number 1. No, here you can see clearly Surah Fatiha starts with the Bismillah as ayah number 1, and then ayah number 2 will be Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now that means that every single time you pray Salah, you must make sure that you start with the Bismillah, otherwise you are missing one line of Surah Fatiha every time. Okay, so why don't we get started with the reading? Okay, so let's start with the first letter, Ba, Kasra, B. Now we don't say B, we say B. You have to make sure that you are rhyming with the word B or tree, C. So now every single time you see a kasra, remind yourself, I'm rhyming with a E, B, tree. Choose the word and always rhyme it with that word. So I'll say B, and now we're going to rhyme everything with a B. So then after we've done that, then we say the S on the sukoon. So the seen on the sukoon, S sound. We don't say bis, we don't join it in one sound. Bis, it's actually 2 separate sounds. B and then S. B, S, not bis. Moving on to the meme, kasra, mi. Now, again, we're rhyming it with the B. So it's B and me, not be and me. So we have B, S, mi. And then after we said me, we then move on to the first of the lams, which has the shadda on it. So that's a double letter lam. And the first one will be the sukoon. So we have mi, l. So here we have B, S, mi, l. Okay. And then the second lam here from that shadda is la. And this is a light lam because of the kasra before it on the meme. So it's mi la, not mi lo. It's light. So B, S, mi, la. The 2 lams here on this shadda, the way to think about how to say it is, if you imagine a skipping rope with 2 ends and the rope in between. If you hold the first lam and then you think of that rope, it's connected to both hands. So hold it for a bit as if you're thinking of the rope, and then you say the second lam. There's no gap in the middle. So we don't say mil, gap, la. No, you hold on to that sound of the first lam, so it will be mila. So we hold on to that first lam for just a moment longer until we can then say the second lam, and that joins the two together. So now we have the ha, kasra, he, again rhyming with b and me, he, not a he. It's Bismillah, he, and we say the he before we merging with the ra sukoon, which is from that ra shadda. So now we have he, and also this is a light ra because of the kasra on the ha. So he, and then we now have the ra fatha, ra heavy. So I've added a capital here to show you this is a heavy letter, ra. So the first one is light, but now the second one, because it's a fatha, is heavy. So we now have ra, and joining on the way I mentioned about the skipping rope with the shadda. So we hold on to the first sound until we can get to the second sound. We don't have a break in between. So ra, and after we've said the ra, do we then start the ha sukoon? Ra. And then the meme, fatha ma, but then we have the alif khanjariya, that small little baby alif that you can see there. This is the same as the long vowel, ma. So that's why I've added an extra a there. So ra, ma. Then we move on to the nun kasra ni, and we say that in its entirety before we move on to the ra from the ra shadda. So ni, so no ne, it's ni. And you must completely widen the mouth, ni, and then here again, ra heavy. So put a capital to show you it's heavy because of the fatha, ni, ra, and holding on. So there's no gap in between the two ras. You hold on the first one. You elongate that sound for just a moment longer before you can move on to the second ra. And then the next letter, ha, kasra, he, and there's also a ayah straight after it, long vowel. So it's he, and then with a meme, when we stop at the end of an ayah, we put a sukoon on here, so it's he. One of the tajweed rules, which I will be covering in the future, is that when we end an ayah and there's a ya or a wow, we elongate that sound. So that's why you'll hear people saying ni rahim, and they make it longer. There's actually a reason for that stretch. So take note of that, but we will explain this in due course. So that's the end of first ayah. Let's move on to ayah number 2, al. Now here, this is the moon letter, which is the reason why there's a sukoon on the lam. So we say that lam, al. And then the next letter, ha, fataha, ha. We don't say hum. We don't move on to the next letter yet. We just say ha by itself. And then after that, once we've completely said the ha, do we then say the meme sakin? So it's al, ham, ham. And then the dal, damma, do. Now another mistake that people make is they say do, alhamdu. It's never, ever, ever going to be do. It will always, with a damma, be a oo sound. You only get a oo with typhu. You must make sure you rhyme with that oo sound. Alhamdu. And so I have added 2 vowels here, which would maybe confuse you into thinking this is a long vowel, but it's just to show you that you have to say do, not do. So I'm making that emphasis here. Then the next letter is lam kasra li, and followed by the lam with sakin on it from the double letter of the middle lam with the shadda on it. So it's li, l, li, l, and then the second of the lam shadda is la. And remember, this is a light Allah because of the kasra on that lam. Lillah, ha kasra, he. Alhamdu lillahi. And then ra, fatha, ra, heavy, so it's ra, and we say that clearly before we move on to the double letter of the ba with shadda on it, b. So it's ra, and we hold on to the ba, and we hold on to it until we can say the ba kasra, b, rabbi. And again, it's rhyming with e, not be, and it's not rabbi, it's rabbi. And then we move on to the lam with sukoon on it. So it's Rabbil. Bil. And then after that we have Ain Fatha, and then there's the Alif Khanjariya again, the baby Alif. So we then have A, long vowel. But this is the light letter. So open the back of your tongue. Let the tongue be flat and calm and loose to say the A. And then the Lam Fatha, La. So it's A, La. Then the Mim Kasra, Mi, with the Ya to make it a long vowel. Mi. And then the Noon Sakin comes at the end, Min. So now remember, we can stretch this Min for 2 or 4 or 6 counts. But again, I'll talk about that in due course. But just to know that you can say this for longer. So it's A, La, Min. And don't forget to say the Noon at the end clearly. Next one is Ar. So here the Ra is the first letter that we will say, Ar, and it's going to be heavy because of the Ra Fatha, Ra. So Ar, Ra. We say that clearly before we say the Ha with the sukoon on it. So Ar, Ra, off. Then we move on to the Mim Fatha, Ma, but there's the Alif there, Alif Khanjari. So this is like a long vowel. Ma, Ar, Ra, Ma. Noon Kasra Ni, and then we say that first before moving on to the Ra from the Ra Mushaddad. And then after that we will then say the second of the 2 Ra's, which is a heavy one, Ni Ra, and then the Ha Kasra with the Ya, long vowel, He, and then the Mim. And again, don't forget to say the Mim clearly, making sure that you put both lips together to get the sound He, Then next ayah number 4, Mim Fatha Ma with the baby Alif there, making this a long vowel. Ma. Open your mouth to make sure that you say it clearly. It's not Ma, it's Ma. Lam Kasra Li and Kaf Kasra Ki. Li and Ki must be rhyming. And again, we are making sure they rhyme with that initial B. No Be, no Le, no Ke. It's not Ma Leke. Okay, it's Ma Li Ki, and you've got to make sure that you stretch your mouth wide. E. Okay, so like cheese. So Ma Li Ki. Now the next one, Ya Fatha Ya, and then we say the vowel with sukoon after. It's not yo as in a yo-yo. It's not a yo-yo at all. It's actually Ya first, then after you've said the Ya do you say the vowel sound. So it's Yaw, and then the Mim Kasra Mi, rhyming with the B, Yaw, Mi. And then we're going to join that Mim with that first of the 2 dals from that shadda. So it becomes Mi and then D. Not mid. It's not Maliki Yawmid. It's Yawmid. Not mid. It's Mi. And then the dal fatha da followed by the ya kasra di. So it's a long vowel D, because we have a kasra and a ya together. And then the noon at the end with a second, because we're stopping at the end of the ayah. So deen. Ayah number 5. Alif kasra E. And then we join it with the ya on the sukoon from the mushaddad there. So E. And then the ya fatha ya with the alif there. So it's a long vowel ya. Now here we have to make sure that we say that ya twice. A lot of people make a mistake here of saying iya, iya, and they miss out the first ya, e, and then ya. You must make sure that you say the 2 yas, otherwise you change the meaning. So it's e, ya. Hold on to the first one for a moment longer until you're able to then say the second. Don't have a break in between and don't miss it out and just say one of the yas. Iya. It's not iya, it's iya. Ka fatha ka, iyaka. Noon fatha na first before we move on to the ain. So it's not na, it's na. So na, na. And the ain comes after you've said the noon fatha na clearly. And then after that, ba, damma, bu. And again, we're rhyming the oo sound with boo, to, lu. Okay, boo. And then the dal, damma, du. Now here, you must make sure it's not bodo, it's not na'bodo, na'bodo. It's boo and do. And you have to circle your lips entirely to make sure you get the correct sound. Na, bu, du. Then you move on to the waw fatha wa. Na, bu, du, wa. And then again, the same as I mentioned before, the alif kasra e. And then you say the ya sukoon after. E. And then the ya alif fatha ya long vowel. E. Ya. Pay close attention to make sure, as I've said before, you say the ya twice. And then move on to the ka fatha ka. Iyaka. Noon fatha na before you say the sin sakin. So na, s, na, s. And here, one of the characteristics of a sin where they have sukoon on it is that you hold on to that sound for a little bit longer. Na, s, na, s. Just to make sure that you get the sound out completely. Then you move on to the ta fatha ta. So na, s, ta. Then ayn kasra e with a ya long vowel. E, e. And make sure your tongue is relaxed because this is a light letter. We have a tendency to say the ayn heavy when we're not familiar with this sound. And then you move on to the noon sakin. And make sure you say that clearly before you move on. Otherwise, it doesn't come out. Even though you think you've said it, for another person listening, they won't hear it unless you are very clear to say the n sound. So it would become Iyaka nasta'in. Ayah number 6. I. Now here, there's no fatha damma kasra, so you just have to know that it's I, and then we say the ha sound. I. It could be but it's not. It's I. And the reason we know it's E is because the letter after that has a kasra. This is a rule that I will cover again in due course, but for now, just to know that the next letter has a kasra on it, so we will say E as well. So E. Now the ha here, just make sure it's like the middle of your chest. It's so low down to get this ha out. E. E. And then the dal kasra, D. And again, we're rhyming with our B, our tree, li, I, D, and the noon fatha na. But that na will be merging onto the sad, but we say the na clearly first before we say the s from the sad of that shadda. So it's na, s. Now this sad here is a heavy letter, so I've put it in capital. Na, s. Now the difference between a sad and a sin, just to make sure we're not saying nes, it's not nes. We have to raise the back. So before, when I was talking about relaxed tongue, here when we try and say a heavy letter, we are going to firm it up and lift it up at the back as much as we can and make it tense. Nes, nes, as opposed to nes. Because they both come from the exact same location in the mouth. So the only way to make the difference is through its attributes. Sin is the light letter, sad is heavy. So we make the sad heavy by tensing up the tongue and raising it at the back. Nes. And then the sad kasra si. Now, although it's a kasra, it's still a heavy letter, so we still have to say the sad as heavy as we can. Now, si. You need to practice on this by saying sa, su, si, sa, su, si. And then moving on to the sin. Sa, su, si, sa, su, si. You need to practice that to make sure that you really get that sad heavy. And so we have here si, ra, fatha ra, but with that alif khanjariya. It's heavy and it's long vowel, so si, ra. And you've got to make sure you try and say your ra heavy because you're coming from a kasra position, e, and now we need to move up to a heavy ra. There's a distance for your tongue to have to travel to get there, so it can come out light. So try and make the effort to make it ra heavy. And then again, another heavy letter, ta. And again, same thing here. It's coming from the same place as the light letter ta, alif ba ta. And it's not sira ta, it's ta. You have to really make sure that you make the emphasis of raising the back of your tongue to say ta, sira, ta, before you move on to the lam second. Ta. And then l after. So sira ta l. Mim damma mu. It's not more. It's mu. And you have to make sure you're making the sound that the cow would make. Moo. Not more. So we want to go for the moo before we move on to the sin second, which is a s. And again, we want to keep that air flowing so we can really hear that sin. Moo s. Then the ta fatha ta. Qaf ya kasra. And it's a long vowel, so we make it longer. And again, this could go on for 2, 4 or 6 counts, but that's your choice. So mustaqi. And then the meme, we're going to end on the ayah here, so we add a sukoon, so it has a meme sakin, and you must make sure you put both top and bottom lips together to get that meme sound out clearly. Moving on to ayah number 7, last ayah of Surah Fatiha. So the Sad Kasra Si, I've put it capital because it's a heavy letter, so Si, and then the Ra, Fatha Ra, with the alif makes it heavy, and also it's a long vowel, so Si, Ra, and then the Ta, Fatha Ta, and the Ra and the Ta should be rhyming, both heavy. Sira Ta, and you say that first before you move on to that lam of sukoon, which is on that shadda there. We then have the second of the lams, La. Sira Ta La. And then Dal, Kasra the with the ya makes it long vowel, the. And you have to make sure you rhyme it with the E sound. And here it's longer because of the long vowel E, and then the noon fatha na, so sirat alladhina. And also another thing to that lam, just before I forget, is that when you say sirat, the ta is a heavy, but you're moving onto a lam sakin which is light. So you're going from a heavy ta to a light lam, and people tend to make the mistake of saying tal because you're saying the ta heavy, and so then you say the lam heavy too, just naturally. But you've got to be absolutely clear, it's not a heavy lam ever. It will always be heavy ta followed by a lam which is light. The lam is only heavy in the word Allah. There's no Allah here. So here we have sirat al. So you have to move from the heavy to the light. And then la vi na. Everything here is light. And then moving on to alif fatha a. And make sure you don't say ain. There's no, because we have a tendency to an'am or an'am. So we say the a n first. Okay, so a first, followed by the n sakin. A n. And then ain. Ah, so that try and practice saying so you can hear the difference, because here we have them both, and then we have the meme sakin so we have n so an am, and then ta fatha ta, an am ta. Moving on, ain fatha a, lam fatha la, a la. They should be rhyming because they're both light. A, la. Then you say the ya sukoon. So that's a, la, y. It's not lay. We're not saying the word lay rhyming with hey. We're saying a, la, y. And eventually sort of turns into a lay, but you're going to say the lam clearly first. So a, la, y. Then the ha kasra he, it's not ha, it's he. He, and then you say the meme sakin he. Here also make sure you're saying the correct ha, the one that's low down on your chest. Him. Moving on to ra fatha ra, and this is a heavy letter, so I've put a capital here to show you. Ra. Be careful, it's not ra. You have to raise the back of the tongue, make it tense. Ra, and then you move on to the ya sakin. So in the same way we said la yi, this is ra yi. La yi, him, ra yi. Then you move on to the ra kasra ri. This is the light letter, and then you move on to the lam sakin after. So you say ri, and this is a light lam, falling on to meme fatha ma. And then you're going to say a heavy ghain sakin. So it's going from a light ma to a heavy ma. And then you move on to the dad, Damma, du, but there's a wow here, so this is a long vowel, du. And then the ba kasra, bi. So we have ghayril maghdubi. Then ain fatha a. Keep your tongue relaxed for the a, don't make it heavy. A, and rhyming with the la, again it's the same word as before. A, la, ya sakin, yi. A, la, yi. Ha kasra, he. Meme sakin, A, la, yi, he, A, la, yi, him. Waw fatha wa, and lam alif fatha la. Now here we're going to merge that lam with the dad mushaddad. So that dad will come after we've said the la clearly. Wa, la. And the wa and the la will rhyme. And then after this, you said the la, you say ضد. Wa, la. Now here, we're holding on to that dad in the same way I was telling you about all the other shaddas, like a skipping rope. So you're holding on to it. But now we have here this long da. Now we all know that whenever we say Surah Fatiha, they say wala da, and they go on for a bit and you don't realize why they're saying it. There's actually a tajweed rule here, which we will cover in due course. But just to know that, you can see there's a squiggle on top of that alif there, and that indicates that this is a long stretch, which is in this particular case 6 counts of stretch. And the way to know that you've done 6 counts is if you were to wag your finger, you wag it quite quickly 6 times, and that would be the duration of 6 counts. And so we have here the dad repeated twice, so we have wa, la, and then da. Now we're going to say that first before we move on to that lam sakin from that first of the shaddas. Now here, I've made this slightly darker purple because it's still a light letter, but when we merge onto that lam, we do something called a nubber. It's like a jump, like a little lift. So we say dal, dal. It's not dal. It's not just like normal flowing in, merging into that lam. You have to sort of raise it a little on that lam. Dal. Like that. And then lam kasra li with the ya making it long vowel li, and then the noon sakin because we've stopped at the end of the ayah li. So we've done the entire surah. Now we will go back and say it in one go. Let's go back to ayah number 1. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. Siratal Ladhina An'amta عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And one last point on this last ayah number 7. There is a tendency to say صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم and then stop. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. That in actual fact is incorrect because we are doing the Hafs Quran. Here there are 7 ayahs, so you have to say it in its entirety, 7 different ayahs, and you're stopping at the end of each ayah. The fact that ayah number 7 is quite long, you still need to take a deep breath and start it from the beginning and go right up to the end. The reason why we've heard of the break after alayhim and then the stop غير المغضوب is because in a different riwayah, a different style of Quran, they actually don't have the Bismillah as the first ayah. They have Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen as the first ayah. Therefore, they break up ayah number 7 into 2 parts. But that's a different riwayah. If you're sticking with the Hafs, then you have to do it the Hafs way, which means that you don't stop after alayhim, have a break, and in ghayril. You don't do that. You have to start, take a deep breath. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. If you do need to stop because you've run out of breath, and we know there's a long 6 count going in the last word, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. So there is the overlap of غير المغضوب because we are saying, I didn't complete the ayah, I'm stopping halfway, so I'm going to go back as an overlap to show you that it wasn't a complete ayah, and that's the reason why you have to do the overlap. Otherwise, the other way is to take the deep breath and say it completely. So let's see how we would say it with the rhythm now. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you practice this. Make sure you keep practicing until you have it. Say it slowly and watch this video over and over until you get it correct before you attempt to say it quickly, because if you have made the mistakes, you will naturally go back into your old habits. So if you have learned anything and there are some areas that you have been doing it slightly incorrectly, go back and repeat the way that I've showed you here, so that you will be aware when you've made that mistake, when you're reciting Surah Fatiha in your salah, you will think, oh, I got that wrong, I need to go back and do it correctly, and you will correct yourself. Even if it's in the salah, go back and correct yourself. I hope you enjoyed this. Hit that thumbs up if you like this video. Don't forget to share. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.